So, welcome, Jen. I am really glad you said yes to being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Me too. I was been reflecting on us and like how we came into each other's lives. So, about 3 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, it's been 3 years, 3 quick
Yeah.
years.
Wow, it has. It's flown because, and I also feel like I've known you forever. It's that one of
Me too.
those, yeah, like
Both.
recognition. Yeah. Well,
Mhm,
thanks to Meryl, we
mhm.
found each other. And, one of the things that I so deeply appreciate about you and have been able to watch up close is your commitment to radical truth. And I mean, I have watched you ask some of the most difficult questions of yourself. And I've watched you grapple with them. I've watched you honestly, you know, be completely disoriented and then stay steady with it anyway. And I don't, I have such an appreciation for that because it can be so easy to turn away because a lot of the decisions and the things that I watched you working through inside of yourself meant that you were going to disrupt everything that you knew in your
Yeah,
life.
yep.
Everything.
Yeah.
Brings up tears just saying it because
Mhm.
it's so courageous. And yeah, and I even remember last year when you were reading Glennon or Glenna Doyle.
Glennon Doyle.
Glennon. Yeah, and that one line where she says, "We can do hard things," or
Mhm.
something like that. And
Yeah,
I remember you referring to that and thinking, "That's exactly what you're up to, woman. Like you are
yeah,
doing hard things."
yeah.
It's been amazing to witness you and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, actually there's lots of different things I want to talk to you about eventually, but today I feel like, when I talk about power reclamation and the work that I'm doing, it's so much about coming into the truth about what we've outgrown in our lives or where we're pretending to be someone that we're not,
Yeah.
for all the reasons that one might do that. And so you have lived such a big heroine's journey around this. And I know that you're birthing a book, and we're going to
Yes.
talk later about the program that you're launching right now that's actually still open for enrollment. And I'm excited to hear more about that.
Yeah.
And it all is on this theme of midlife emergence. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. And what I really want to unpack together, and we'll figure out how this just unfolds naturally, is I want to hear about your personal journey today of midlife emergence. And I also want to hear what midlife emergence means to you. So maybe we just start there of like, what does that term mean? And then I want to start asking you some more personal questions about it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Gosh. So I began this body of work, the Midlife Emergence body of work, creating, like writing the book and creating the program. I guess the seeds of it happened when COVID hit, really. And when the shelter in place order came into place in March of 2020, I was at kind of the peak of this huge personal transformation that I had begun to feel the rumblings of a few years prior. And it was really during that time that I started concretely writing and concretely creating Midlife Emergence. I had, I guess, just to start with some of my journey, and I'll get to answering
Yeah.
exactly what that term means to me, but I had built this beautiful life. I was in a stable, loving marriage of 17 years to my husband, who was and is still my best friend. We have an awesome teenage daughter. We were living in our dream home in our dream city. I had a nearly 20-year career as a licensed counselor and art therapist, and I have some truly deeply meaningful friendships. But I was so unsettled, and I wanted more, and I
Mhm.
felt ashamed for wanting more,
Yeah.
for not feeling fully satisfied with all of that. And I think for a woman to want more, it's such a patriarchy shattering stance, I guess, to take. Like, it's a power reclamation, if you will. I
Indeed.
mean, our work has some overlap that way, yeah.
Yes.
But like, it really is. It's like taking power back from those molds that we're expected to fit into, and these prescriptive things that are supposed to, give us the satisfaction in our lives. And I felt like there was a piece of my authenticity that was completely invisible in that life. And my health, my like mental health, spiritual and emotional health, even my physical health were all taking a hit because of that. I mean, I had such inflammation issues, which is really inner fire, right? Like,
Right.
I was
Mhm.
like, so much was burning in me. And my truth and my particular story that was feeling just unseen at the time was, and was eating away at me, was mostly centered around living into and exploring the fullness of my fluid sexuality.
Mhm.
Um, and there's so many other pieces. Like I had questions about every facet of my life, like career, relationships, you name it, really, parenting, everything. Um, but I think this was the piece that felt um, like it was the most like festering most inside and needed to be expressed in some way.
Mhm.
And I've always been attracted to women, so that's something that my ex-husband now, Craig, and I, when we got together, we were 23, and he knew that about me and fully accepted that about me. And it really hadn't become an issue in our marriage until it did.
Mhm.
And I felt like in the first 10 years of my daughter's life, I don't know, I was really like, I kept my head down in like parenting mode. I had postpartum anxiety that seriously probably lasted like a decade,
Oh my
like
god.
really. And when she was 10, there was this like parallel individuation process, I think, between the two of us, where I began to have more of my life back and more of my time back. And she was, growing into more friendships and things. And it's around this like 10-year marker, I remember, of her birthday. She's now 14 and a half. Um, I had more time for myself and I started listening to my own music in the car again instead of kid music. And I began to feel sexual again, but all of my sexual energy and all of my desire was directed toward women and not
Mhm.
my husband. So that became, a really burning point, like between the two of us at the time. And we explored the idea of opening our marriage, which we did mostly theoretically for the first couple of years, reading every book there is, going to a couples counselor who specializes in polyamory, like, learned a lot about that. And it was a couple of years into that exploration that I actually began to date a woman and had my first girlfriend when I was almost 45.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
I
that was
love it.
a long time coming.
Mhm.
Um, and a couple months into that new relationship, that's when the shelter in place began.
Uh,
For COVID. And I was feeling so lonely then, even in my awesome house and my awesome family. Like I was just kind of at this breaking point where I knew something had to shift. And at that time, I think at that beginning of shelter in place is when I consulted with an astrologer who we both know, Eric Myers.
oh yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I had been talking with Eric every year around my birthday for like 15 years. And I told him wanted this session. I told him the gist of my earbud of like the turmoil that I was going through and my longing. And he looked at my chart and he laughed. And he was like, Jen, you are right on time. Like you're in what astrologers call the Uranus opposition, which is what most people in our culture call the midlife crisis. But he was like, if I was writing a book on the Uranus opposition, you would be my case study because you're doing it beautifully. If you do it well, who you are before it and who you are after it look completely different. So congratulations. And he's like all celebratory and I'm sobbing. And
Right.
I'm like, wait a minute, what? So I'm like, what is this thing? And what I learned from him was that the Uranus opposition is when the planet Uranus is halfway across the zodiac from the point where it was at the time of our birth. And it happens when we're 42 and we feel the effects of it on either side of 42 for a couple of years on either side. And Uranus is the planet of rebellion and freedom and unpredictability and higher awareness of self. So it the energy we feel during that time apparently like is one that blows open anything that we have held back or repressed or anything that's invisible, and it invites us to kind of re-individuate and shift our identity from the expectations of childhood into more mature expressions of ourselves and to figure out what those are. So he's like, you're doing that. That's
Here.
exactly what's happening here.
Uh-huh.
And he was telling me about my own unique chart. He's like, if you were actually to embrace, the nature of what you're being called into, it's about letting go of my early conditioning of being the good girl or wanting to be
Mhm.
liked or really following what is set in the status quo,
Mhm.
what I've been domesticated into, and instead to embrace, and specifically in my chart, which kind of interesting, was about being visible via writing and teaching, about things that are subversive or edgy or raw, things that are more metaphysical, things that are more about intimacy and sensuality, and just about like unconventional living. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, fuck yes. Like when I heard this, like,
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm up to. Like, that's what I want to be doing. And so I started writing. And I just started writing little snippets on this project I was doing at the time on Instagram, which is my favorite form of social media because I'm really visual. And I started sharing little blurbs of my story, about queer femme invisibility, about open marriage, about, um, yeah, all sorts of ways that I wanted to claim more for myself and about radical truth telling. And it felt so scary and so vulnerable. And um, I started to get feedback from other women who could relate to that, and who had resonant stories, whether they were in the comments, but mostly in direct messages, because
Uh-huh.
a lot of them were like, I'm so scared of burning down my whole life. Like when I read this, I'm like, gosh, I feel the same, but I don't want to burn it all to the ground, which I totally understood because I was sitting in that same fear place.
Yeah.
And it just felt so validating for me to hear back from others that they were feeling this way, but also it felt so good to be, um, just able to give a voice to something that I think a lot of us keep hidden and keep at bay to not rock the boat, you know?
Right.
I think like to have that mirrored outside is, it can be really healing. So I kept writing it and doing it in a really messy way because I couldn't, it was a mess, like I didn't
Yeah.
have it all mapped out. It wasn't like linear and, you know, organized and masculine energy. It was just more
Mhm.
like
Here's what's
round
here
and
today.
feminine. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. So
Mhm.
that was, I guess, the birthplace of that work. And some of these people were saying, you should make this a book. And I was like, gosh, I've always wanted to write a book my whole life. Even when I was little, I was like, I want to be an author and an artist. And I also wanted to be a SEAL trainer in
Oh,
SeaWorld, but
nice.
that one, that one's
That
not
one's not gonna come to
happening.
pass.
No, not at all interested in that anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just was like, okay, I'm gonna start like trying to create this into a book. And over the last year, I've written a book that has yet to be published. I'm still learning a lot about the world of publishing and seeking a publisher. Um, but in the meantime, I want to be sharing this with others. So I decided to create an online program called Midlife Emergence as well, that will take people through a journey of their own midlife emergence. And yeah, to answer, I guess, what that means to me, you had asked like midlife. Um, I mean, for me, I'm defining it astrologically because my own experience really felt like 42 was the screaming midpoint for me, but I did
Mm.
start to feel it, a little before 40, and I'm still feeling it. And I don't even know how old I am. I'll be 46 this year.
Yeah.
Like, how old am I?
Solstice
um,
baby.
yeah, I am. Yeah, on the
Mhm.
winter solstice, I'll be 46. And I love the word emergence because it really changes up I guess, the social norm of calling it like a midlife crisis. Like a crisis is an
Yes.
emergency. And the emergence it doesn't have to be an emergency. Like this midlife time period that we're called into, um, is about coming into view. So the word emergence is actually defined as coming into view or being exposed after being previously concealed. And
Mm.
that for
Wow.
me just feels so resonant to exactly what I was up to. Just like
Mhm.
unveiling parts of myself that had been unseen or dormant or so even unconsciously domesticated, and just picking all of that apart. So,
Yeah.
um,
Wait, I'm gonna pause for 1 second. Will you say
yeah,
that line again? about being concealed. What is that exactly?
Yeah, the definition of emergence
Mhm.
is the process of coming into view or becoming exposed after being previously concealed.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's like bringing forth what has been previously unseen. And
Mm.
I mean, as an art therapist, I like basically have a master's degree in making the unseen seen. It's like so
Yeah.
what I feel like it's like the work I'm here to do in the world in a way with myself
Mhm.
first and then to, foster that in other people. So
Mhm.
um it's been yeah, that's been what I've been doing over here in my sweatpants for the last 16 months or however long it's been.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so rich to hear you speak about just well, even that piece that you just shared. I mean, I wonder I have so many thoughts going at the same time. I actually want to go back. So basically
Yeah.
you woke up inside of yourself during a certain period of time. You're in this incredible life. I know how much you love your ex-husband. I mean,
Hmm.
you have shared so many beautiful things about him,
Hmm.
and yet something some part of you needed more, and it felt like it was through your sexual expression
Yeah.
towards women.
Yes.
And you said something about the guilt around that. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to what was happening for you as you had this longing. What
Yeah.
was the guilt and what was happening in your marriage and how were you dealing with that?
Wow. Yeah. I think the guilt of, gosh, I have this on paper
Mhm.
perfect life. And really, I could not imagine a better man and partner than my ex husband, Craig. Like, he's really, truly the best and still my best friend. He's certainly the hero in my book. It's not me, like, at all. And I just felt like, how is this not enough? Like, what is wrong with me that this has to be about sex? Like, that felt almost, I don't know, a little too like a little too decadent or self-absorbed to even focus on
Mhm.
that piece when everything else is wonderful. Um, and it also is like, it's not just about sex, it's really about my passion, my eros, like the current that runs through my life of energy and feeling like some of that was squelched. Not just by not acting on it, but also not being visible in it. I'd always been in heteronormative relationships in my life because it wasn't really the way that I was brought up in the Southeast in a pretty conservative environment. Like, it wasn't even an option for me in a way, like in the generation I grew up in too. I mean, now I feel so grateful that my daughter's in a place where and in a time when that's, more on the surface, but then it just wasn't. And so I feel like I don't know, it felt like it was time, like we only have this one life and like I wanted to have that experience, like, and I wanted to have that experience of myself really,
Mhm.
of being fully expressed in that way and to be visible in that way. And um I felt a lot of guilt, yeah, to answer
Yeah.
your question about that guilt of like how this is going to impact the people I love.
Uh,
um and I know that like not living in alignment with my truth would actually impact them more.
mm,
um it was important to me to model for my daughter um, a way of actually listening internally more so than listening to any other external voice. Like, I
yeah.
want her to live like that. I want her to be in relationships that she feels, like she can be her fullest self in. And
Mhm.
for me to, like, I guess, extinguish something in me in order to do that with Craig would have done her a disservice and me a disservice and Craig a disservice, really. Like, so as hard as it is, like, yeah, definitely doing hard things. It was like, it would be harder to not have taken that path in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
it's so tender though,
yeah, I was just
still.
feeling, yeah, yeah, like letting that be here because it's such a big deal to
Yeah.
be just the one that's quote disrupting things
Hmm.
in the name of some fire within
Yes.
while there's these external voices that have become internalized. It's like, oh, you're being so indulgent. You already have
Hmm.
enough. Why do you want more?
Yeah.
And yet this comment that you just made feels so powerful to me, because if we're not in alignment and living the fullness of who we are, then is that really serving the people around us? And I
Right.
think there's an illusion that, oh, well, I don't want to disrupt things, so I'm just going to keep things as they are and probably, we'll be okay. But then there's this enduring that happens in the system and everyone feels it.
Yeah. They can't not feel it. I
I
think that
know.
is what became really evident to me when we were all in a house together during
Yeah.
shelter in place. And it was like my lack of happiness and satisfaction and joy and just like, I don't know, my freedom in a way. d- Um, I wasn't I wasn't that person. I wasn't living
Mhm.
that way, and I could feel that, and I knew that that was impacting them as much as it was impacting me. And so it became really clear at that point that Craig and I would do better to not force, an intimate relationship, but to really reframe what it was that we were going to be to each other and the type of love we would have for each other. If it wasn't going to be romantic love or sexual love, like what type of love is it? Like
Mm.
how to recognize this higher form of love and to start to live that way and embody that, which meant having a really conscious, connected divorce. We started that process during that time. And, choosing that was the hardest thing, really. But it also was like harder not to
Mhm.
choose that in a way, because we had tried for years to think of all the creative solutions to how we could have everything. And when it came down to it, it was like the best thing to do to let go of each other in that way.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and just how to parent our daughter through all of that, and um, really show her that we were listening deeply to our own inner truths and to not disappoint ourselves, more so than like worrying about disappointing other people and their expectations and projections and roles, that
Yeah.
they had us in.
Yeah.
And that brings up a ton. I mean, the word divorce is loaded. And
Yeah.
so, even in talking with my friends about, here's what's going to happen, and talking with my own little self about here's what's going to happen,
Mhm.
like I saw divorce in my own family and it certainly didn't look like this. It brings up so much about abandonment and, um, yeah, just people not ever communicating with each other again or having animosity toward each other. And just the pictures in my head, even around that word, are really dire. It's like totally not what Craig and I are up to. And it's like we're trying to re-author that experience in a way for ourselves and for our daughter. So
Yeah.
it's hard. So
Yeah. It's, well, because you're revolutionizing something.
yeah.
And I want to stay on that for a minute, because as someone who's been observing your life and learning about you over the years, I have been blown away at what you
Mm,
and Craig have done together and the
mm,
amount of love. So my experience around divorce has also been, there's a rupture, there's anger, and there's
yeah.
oftentimes no more communication. But what I consistently saw you two doing was just staying in the love and
Yes.
working through whatever was arising within each of you. And I just want to plug him today, because just the bit that I do know, it just felt like he's the kind of being that was just, he loves you so I'm probably going to cry saying this, because he loves you so much that he was willing to he wanted you to go find what was going to make you fully expressed as a being.
Yeah.
And he wasn't trying to like hold you back or pin you down. And I don't see that very often. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your experience of him doing that and what that was like for you inside in terms of getting to where you are now.
It's overwhelming actually, like to feel that degree of love. It's really
Yeah.
pure, and ironically, it's like in keeping with our wedding vows, which were like to love each other enough to let each other be the most free versions of ourselves. And I think that we are upholding our wedding vows and getting divorced, which sounds strange, but that's exactly what we signed up for in this life, and we're still doing that with each other. And yeah, it's difficult to break out of like, I don't know, just the mode of being used to living in a house with someone,
Mhm.
and all of the history and all of the patterns and the rituals and things we have together. We're reshaping those now, and that feels hard. Feels hard every time I go over there, and I'm like, oh, this is my house, but it's not my house, you know. And
Right.
it's just, I was there this morning, and it just feels it's strange still, you know, to navigate that, but to feel that degree of love is something I've never experienced. Like it's I think even stronger now than it has been in the years, you know, earlier in our marriage. Probably, I think these last, probably the last 4 or 5 years of our marriage, we've been super mindful about our love because things were starting to come up, and we were like, okay, how can we work to stay together, and we're a unit, and we're a team, and we're still a unit, and we're still a team, and we're still a family. He is absolutely kin, you know. And
Mhm.
um but we were forcing something to fit that just wasn't. And you know, even like with the reflections of other women I know who are like, yeah, okay, so if you're, you know, if the sex isn't totally there in the way that you want it to be, like, that's fine. That's how all marriages are at this point. You've been married for so long, like that kind of thing. And it wasn't exactly that. It was like just this whole other part of me that I wanted to experience. And his grace in not only understanding that, but like supporting it, like actively supporting it, you know? Um, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of like funny things that we've said or done. Like the last call we had with our mediator for our divorce was all on Zoom because of COVID. And at the very end, he was like, you know, talking with and working with a couple like you, you relate so well to each other, and you're so generous and loving with each other. And we're both sitting on the same Zoom screen. And he's
Uh-huh.
like, we were both at his house. And he was like, I sometimes wonder, like, why would people like you two get divorced? And that was like the last thing he said to us. And we were both like, a little like weepy. And then we said goodbye and we ended the Zoom. And Craig looked at me and he was like, because you're gay as fuck. And it's okay. I was like,
Seriously.
yeah, you know, it
That
was
is
like he waited to end the Zoom call before that, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just matter of fact. It's like we've always known this. I'm so glad I got this many years with you. Yay! Um, so
wow.
there's some levity there too, and it's just been
Yeah.
really sweet to have that with each other now.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
how it sounds like the love between the two of you, you said it feels stronger than earlier in your marriage. Can you share why was
Mm.
why you sense that is?
I think because well, I mean, I think with passing time, I tend to fall more deeply in love with the people I love if
Yeah.
I'm actually connected to them, and I think that it's the connection that feels deeper. It feels like we are awake. I
Mhm.
think earlier in our marriage, and certainly probably around the time we had a child, there's this element of like being back to back rather than face to face or side to side, like where we're a team in a different way. We're like parenting, and we're, you know, working on our careers, and we're doing these sorts of things that don't always bring mindful attention back to the relationship.
Mm.
And the fact that we've really been intentionally looking at our love and working on it. I think that's why it feels deeper in a certain way to me. Even if it's not romantic love necessarily, um, yeah, it's something broader. I don't even have a word for it or a definition for it, but it feels more permanent than it did with the rings on, you know,
Wow.
than the promise of forever
Yeah.
wedding vow thing.
That's a powerful statement. It's like there isn't the container of safety that would come
Yeah.
with, monogamous marriage, but
Hmm.
rather a depth of commitment to each other at this level of it feels like such a generous expression of love. Like be who
Yeah.
you both fully are, even if you have to be grieving and jealous or whatever might have arisen. it
Mhm.
feels like what the steady path was, liberate one another to be your full selves, which is incredible that that was in your vows, you know, 18 years
Yeah.
ago, 19 years ago, whatever it would have been now.
2003. Gosh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't even know. Yeah.
18.
18 years ago now. And we
Yeah.
were together for 3.5 years before that. So
Okay.
it's really
Yeah.
been more than half my life that, he's been in it. And um, yeah, it is really a gift, I think, to be at this place. And it's scary. It's so scary because there's no map for it. It's pretty
Right.
uncharted, and I don't really have models for how this can look. And there's definitely fear and grief and jealousy and all of the emotions at the same time. And just watching my own emotional capacity to hold all of those conflicting things in every moment is
Mm.
kind of astonishing, you know,
Yeah. And you're
especially
speaking. Oh, go ahead.
especially the grief, like to be
Yeah.
grieving and to be like ecstatic about a new way of being, like
Mm.
looking at, what my life can be now or what's ahead, and grieving simultaneously in the same minute. Sometimes it's like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I know our friend Meryl calls that emotional pluralism, and
Uh-huh.
it's totally what that feels like. It's like these conflicting things, and they're both here right now and all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It really stretches. I think it's such a big part of the spiritual path. It's really stretching your inner container to be able to hold a lot, multiple things at the same time.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
multiple ways of loving and having enough
Mm.
love that I can hold more and more of it rather than having to choose love.
Yeah, I'm glad you just named that because I feel in most situations it's like choose one or the other. And
Right.
maybe you could speak a little bit about how it was a both and for you. Is there more you could say about that around your journey with love and that particularly like you could actually love two people and how has that been?
Yeah. I have definitely seen my capacity to do that and my capacity to grow my heart and
Yeah.
stretch my heart in a way that is painful, actually, sometimes, like growing pains, but um, feeling that the edges of that and then pushing them to stretch more, to hold more types of love and more people to love. I think that um, limiting myself to one person to love has been, I don't know, a little bit unnatural, or it's like following a script or a prescription that I thought was the only way for a long time. And it still may be the way that I do function naturally. I'm not sure that I'm naturally like polyamorous, and I'm
Hmm.
not in a polyamorous relationship now. I'm monogamous at this point with my girlfriend, but um, yeah, I just feel like I know I have such a huge capacity to love and so much love to give and experience reciprocally that it feels boundless right now. Like it feels like there's some freedom in this new life that can expand into who knows what,
Yeah.
which is scary and great.
Right. Because it's so unknown.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
this is what you were speaking about with domestication, because in a way, to unravel from domestication is literally to discover how big our hearts are when it comes to
Right.
love.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
Because especially with romantic, there's such a perception. At least I was raised this way and grew up in an environment where you love one person
Yeah.
and you're unfaithful if your heart wants to expand to love other, whether it's
Mhm.
sexual or not,
Right.
but it has maybe that romantic feel to it. So
Hmm.
maybe you could speak a little bit about what's it been like, or have you integrated these two loves? And do they know each other? And can you speak a little bit about how that looks?
Yeah. Yeah, they do know each other, and it's funny because it started out where our relationships were overlapping.
Right.
I was with her while I was with him for several months, and then that switched to only being with her romantically,
Hmm.
and it's been hard. It's not something I've known how to traverse or how to even be. Um, I feel like I'm kind of in between, a lot of different things. It's like I want to be enough for everyone. Like I want to be the good enough girlfriend, and I want to also prioritize my family and prioritize the relationship with Craig and growing that in this new direction
Mhm.
that we have. And I want to give a lot of time and energy to that and to my daughter and parenting. So in a lot of ways, I feel sometimes I feel split and I feel like not enough in all of these places. And then other times I feel this enoughness and abundance almost of love. Like, oh, the way I can look at this is like there is more love being invited into my life. And so um, it depends on my mood and it depends on the day as to like how rough it is or how not. But yeah, integration's a really slow process. I've found, in this way of like, it's not like the two of them are best friends and going out for coffee or anything at this point, but we've spent some holidays together and things like that. So it's happening, but it's happening in a, really slow pace. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's the deep listening. It's like
Yeah.
find everyone finding their way and giving enough
Yeah.
room for
I
that.
don't want to force any of that to happen. I think that's
Mhm.
the part where I've tried to be a little more hands off about that because I just want it to feel natural.
Yeah. Great. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So another thing I'm curious about is it sounds like it's been such a transparent process in your family. And
Hmm.
were you sharing this, or how, let me ask it this way. How was it sharing it with your daughter? And how have you, because you were talking about modeling this for her.
Right.
What do you feel like she has learned from you and Craig about what you've done, what you've chosen, and how you've approached it?
Hmm. Well, sharing her with her initially, she continually surprises me and gives me hope for future generations. But we shared with her that we were in an open relationship earlier on. And she was like, I think that's so cool and so modern of you. Like, she was like, that's great. You'll never cheat on each other because of that. You'll just be honest about everything. And we had shared
Wow.
it with her when she had kind of a question at the time. She was in one relationship, but she was like starting to be interested in someone and was like, do you and dad ever kiss people besides each other? And he was like, you got this one. You want to answer that? And I was like, well, and it was funny. It was like such an opening, I guess, for that conversation. And then her response to it was wonderful. And then when I um, told her that I was dating someone, she was like, I am so proud of you and I'm so happy for you that you get to experience this and that you get to be more fully yourself. And she was 13, had just turned 13 at the time when I told her that. And she cried out of like, oh, good job, mom, and that kind of blew me away. And then when we told her we were separating, of course she had grief. Like she had the three of us were like in a room for a whole day like talking and processing and crying and it was so like such a hard day and not just a day, I mean so many days are hard, right? But um like over and over, but she understood it and worked through it so beautifully and quickly. Like, I don't know how I could have any anger about this because you're just being more you and, to me. And I'm so happy for you. And I'm so glad you guys are doing this way and just trusting us that we would still be a family and that we'd still have family dinners together and holidays. And we are maintaining that. And she's been so supportive of my new relationship. She loves my girlfriend like so much. They have a lot in common, so that's really
Amazing.
fun.
Uh-huh.
And it's been it's been really beautiful to watch someone who is like newer to earth like process these
Yeah,
things without all of this social shit on top of it that
exactly.
the projections that come from people my own age. She doesn't have that built in. Like her responses to us are very pure, and of course she has sadness about it in some moments, but she also that she knows that there's this underlying like holding of her between the two of us, like,
Mhm.
and that we're all a family, and we even took a family trip together this summer. And it just is I know that that's always going to be there. And I think she knows that too, because Craig and I both know it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful that she is what a special being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really.
She really is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's interesting because it brings up for me your comment about, she hasn't had all that kind of conditioning judgment.
Hmm.
Can you share? I mean, you shared a little bit about the word divorce, and that has this
Hmm.
connotation that you've really had to work through.
Hmm.
What would you say one of the other really hard things has been around the visibility and people's projections on you or on you and Craig?
Yeah. It's so surprising to me. So I have a whole chapter in my book about this, about it's called Facing Mirrors, but it's about like projections and about the way that other people respond when we change, when we go through like a metamorphosis and we're not who they expected us to be, or we're not who we used to be to them, or we're not staying in that box where we've comfortably been for like
Yeah.
maybe our whole lives with, our family of origin or with friends that are like long standing. Um, I was so annoyed with myself I that my writing about this ended up warranting a whole chapter and a whole module in my online program,
Oh, wow.
because I was like, how does this piece, it felt so um outside of the experience in a way, and it felt like, oh, I should know how to deal with this stuff, and like why does it take up this much space? But really way the thing that was keeping me up at night so much, I think, were the projections or the expectations or letting people down in certain ways, or being judged, or even if I wasn't being judged, thinking I was being judged, like me projecting
Exactly.
onto them that they have projections about me. Like,
Yeah.
it was this like crazy making thing of like um caring what other people think, and
Mhm.
which is something that is like a young part of me, and many of us who were raised to be good girls and to be liked, and I want to be liked,
Exactly.
and what if they don't like me anymore, what if they don't like who I'm becoming, or I don't fit into what they expected me to be, and
Mhm.
having those kinds of thoughts, really, I mean, that became like one of the heavier pieces for me. So um and whether it was real or perceived like by me, in some cases I made all that up in my head, and in other cases I really did have real stories with particular friends or people who were like, what are you doing, like you're blowing up all your life, you're going to regret this, I don't want you to do something you're regretting,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And while I'm appreciative of that, because it's like the voice, a different voice. It's
Yeah.
not just like blowing sunshine up my ass, like you're doing it,
Mhm.
everything perfectly, good job. It's like voicing real concerns as a true friend would.
Yeah.
Um, but hearing it and then saying, okay, and I have to do this anyway is hard.
Yeah.
And to still maintain the friendships, and to
Mm.
say, yeah, and I still have to do this, and to be received in that, is really touching, to say that
Mm.
this is the way this is going to go down, and like I hope you're still going to support me. Um, yeah, I've had that happen as well, and so um, I mean, I wish I was the person who gave zero fucks, like I think that's a common thing in midlife, like people being like,
Yeah.
I'm old enough now to give no fucks. Like I
Uh-huh.
give all the fucks. I have so many fucks to give all over the place because I care. Like I care about everything deeply, but I I do care what the people I love feel and think about me, because we're
Yeah.
in close relationship, and they don't need to agree with me or what I'm doing, but I value that form of love. Like my
Mhm.
close girlfriends are some of the biggest loves of my life. And so that's important to me.
Yeah. Would you say that the journey that you've been through in your friendships has strengthened the love
Mm, yes.
because of all of the having to clear out projections, perceived or real?
Yeah, I do think that. I think having those real conversations has strengthened the connection for sure. But the weird part is that we've been going through this during a global pandemic. So it's
Right.
also felt really isolating. And I haven't
Mm.
been able to be in as close a contact, socially with people as I normally would have been. So
Mhm.
some of this feels like it happened in a cocoon, of my own,
Yeah.
which I guess is appropriate for a metamorphosis, um,
Mm.
but a little bit lonely, So I think that's still a journey that is ahead, um, for friendships, relationships. There's a part of integrating, even like in my new relationship with my girlfriend, of like that's also happened inside of this COVID bubble,
Right.
So we haven't really been able to be around each other's friends as much as we normally would have, having been in
Mhm.
relationship for almost 2 years. And and I haven't really been able to be around my friends as much. I mean, we are here and there a bit when things open up some, or when we can do things outdoors or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
not like it used to be. So
Mhm.
I feel sad about that. Like that's something that I think is going to require some time and some more effort.
Yeah. And that feels like a big phase of whatever metamorphosis or emergence that we go through. At least it has for me,
Yeah.
where I'm not the same person that I was, and people are having to adjust and then to adjust to whatever that activates or opens in them and vice versa.
Right.
So
Right.
that I love the spaciousness you're giving it right now of
Mm,
like that's still the journey that part of the journey is going to continue to be tended to and nourished.
yeah,
And it's because it is sort of a reset of who you
it is.
are and how
And
you
it's
all
like
relate.
a reintroduction of myself to a lot of people
Yeah,
too. And that feels like that. I mean, I think that coming out of COVID, if that's what we're doing, even
I
um,
know.
feels like that for a lot of people, really like going back out
Mhm.
into the world, like, oh, this is who I am now, or they've reprioritized things in some way. And a lot of people I know are like, oh, I know what's important to me now, or I know how to, manage my time in a way that I just am really um, stingy about my energy, and who I give
Yes.
energy to. And I think that's a common experience in general. And I've gone through this like complete 180 in my life
Mhm.
during that time when we were all just sort of at home.
Sweat. Mhm.
Yeah, sweatpants.
Sweatpants.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still there. I always will
Yeah.
be. Comfy pants forever. But yeah, coming, yeah, back out into friendships and into the world in a
Mhm.
totally different way is, yeah, it's weird for me. It's taking a lot of my energy to do that, and
Yeah.
I'm having to do it very slowly.
That's the grace of like pacing and
Yeah,
giving yourself the pacing. I think that's part of undomesticating ourselves as well is finding the right pace that we need.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to come back to something you said because I think it's probably a big part of your program and it seems like such a
Mm,
big part of challenges in general is if there is that good girl or even if there isn't the good girl
mhm,
persona, there's the reality that we're going to disappoint people and they're going to
yeah.
disappoint us. And so do you want to add anything about how that has been playing out in this process that you've been in?
Mm, gosh, I think that, yeah, dealing with disappointment is something that has always been up for me. Like when you met me, even I
Yeah.
remember us talking about like how to sit in disappointment and be
Mhm.
okay with that, um and how to disappoint other people and let that be okay. Let it not be, I don't know, like it's okay if we're not completely in alignment or liked,
Yeah.
but that it's so hard. It's so hard. But I think
Mhm.
the bottom line of that for me has just been about not abandoning myself and not disappointing myself. And when I'm able to do that, I think the concern about disappointing other people does fall away somewhat. I can feel guilt about it, or I can feel empathy for like, gosh, the impact this has on you, must hurt or something like that. And I can totally be there with someone in that if I've created that impact.
Mhm.
And I know that it's still the right thing if I'm not letting myself down or abandoning myself. And it's a tough spot to be in. It doesn't feel awesome
Yeah.
because I wasn't raised to have that feel awesome.
Oh,
I was raised to like people please, right? And so
yes.
the second I stop people pleasing and say, well, actually no, this is who I am, or this is a boundary, or this is a truth, yeah, that's going to ruffle feathers and rock boats. And I, really wasn't raised to rock any boats. So it's not familiar. And I guess that's
Mhm.
like some of the hard thing for me and dealing with disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a direct contradiction to your conditioning. So you're really having to literally rewire your brain by
Right.
trying to be with it in a new way.
Yeah.
If I want to go back to love, because you've talked about transforming the love, staying in the love with Craig, how you're
Hmm.
doing that in your friendships, what you've been doing with your daughter around the conversations of love and expansion.
Hmm.
But it feels like being willing to disappoint people and take ownership for impact, like hear impact, is
Hmm.
such a form of love. Because I don't know about you, and I'd be curious, I want to hear your thoughts, because I work this all the time in my life. When there's an impulse to withhold and not disappoint somebody, it's really it's more me operating out of fear than love. But when I'm so conditioned to do that, it's very hard to see that because it's so threatening.
Right.
I don't want to lose connection and I don't want to be perceived a certain way. So what's your thought on that?
Oh, yeah. That's really the piece that's so hard. Like I crave
Mm.
connection more than anything else, right? Like
Yeah.
even being even when I'm in my time alone, I'm an introvert, and when I'm alone, I notice like one of the first things I do, I like being alone, but then I also want to connect deeply with one other person. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
who can I call or
Uh-huh.
something? But I'm always wanting that connection. So there's always this fear of loss of connection if I'm not being if I'm disappointing someone, yeah, or if I have to do that. But what I've noticed that is in doing that, and if I do it in a way that where I do take ownership and we do have like a meaningful conversation around it, the connection strengthens and deepens
Yes.
if it is meant to hold. So
Yes.
it doesn't really, you can't really lose it if
Meant
you
to
tend to
hold.
it well. Yeah, if it's meant
Yes.
to hold, and if
And you
there's
tend
tending
well.
on both parts, like if both people
Mm.
want to like work through that, um, then we do, and it's difficult, and it strengthens connection. And I walk away feeling like that was a worthwhile conversation, and I grew, and my heart expanded, and like that's what we're here for,
Yeah.
Like I'm really only interested in having real growth producing, love expanding conversations, and not bullshitting, and not small talking,
Totally.
or not withholding like pieces of myself just to acquiesce to something. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, that's no
Yeah.
fun for me.
Well, it's just not who you are becoming. Like that's the old
Yeah,
conditioned self that many of us.
right. Yeah.
Okay, this is so rich. I want to transition because I want to
Okay.
hear a little bit more about your program. And it sounds like there's
Yeah.
still some openings. So can you share
Yeah.
with listeners what are you up to and what's the invitation?
So yeah, I wrote the book Midlife Emergence first, and then I realized I wanted to have these conversations with other people who are going through this, not just a one way, like, here's a book. And the book is memoir, but it's also an invitation for the reader to dive deeply into their own emergence, and it will,
Mm,
be unique to each person. So, as I went through mine, I sort of my own emergence, it wasn't linear at all. There's not like, I really wish I could have written a book and created a program that was like, 10 steps to an easy midlife,
right.
transition. Here you go. Like that does not exist. And everyone's is going to be different and about different topics. Um, but I did find as I went through it, I sort of made um, signposts along the way of like universal themes
Mhm.
that feel like they would be something each person would come up against, or at least
Mm,
want to explore in themselves during this developmental milestone, like being called in to re-individuate from, I think the first individuation like in teen years is more like separating from your parents. Like this is, yes, that, and society, and
yeah.
really just getting right with your internal navigation. So I in the program really want to, I want to actively have these conversations with women. So there's like a cohort
Mm,
forming where um, I think it's just so powerful to be truth telling and visible in it, because I think it's
mhm.
so magnetic and so healing, like to hear other people going through the same thing. So I'm really excited about that piece. but there are 13 modules, and I'm putting a lot of space in it. I gave 2 weeks for each of the modules, and each module is a theme. One might be illuminating early conditioning, or one is that, not might be. There are ones about working with projections from others when you go through a change. So they're just different, non-linear and not specific to a theme. Like I have had, I do free consults with women who are interested in the program, who can ask me questions. And the thing that's come up is like, I like my life and I don't want to change it entirely. And I don't want to blow things up. Is this going to blow up my life? I don't necessarily need to blow up my marriage. And then, like, no, you don't have to. Like, everyone might be working with something completely different. Mine happened to be something that changed my marriage and was around sexuality. But for other people, it could be something completely different. And so it's not specific to my story, although I share my story as an example of how I moved through it. But it can be just a turn inward to really hear what that inner quaking is. There's sometimes this call that I've found in the women I've worked with, as a therapist and as a coach, of like, is this all there is? And why isn't this enough? And I need to change something. And I don't exactly know what the longing is. And so we spend time there in the beginning of the program, really like learning what the shape of the longing is and identifying it and admitting it to ourselves. Sometimes we already know what it is actually, but we just don't want to say it out loud. And so really, it's for women who can no longer deny that inner voice that's whispering or shouting, even, to become more themselves or to break free from any of those confines and cages that they may have put themselves in or that the world has, just to be bigger, more expanded, more free.
And it sounds really like it'll be the cohort will co-create it based on each woman's going to come with something unique to her, but you're going to guide them through conversations
Yes.
and discovery process. And then the learning, talk about visibility, the learning of witnessing one another and seeing the universal themes together.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that that's
beautiful.
really powerful because the visibility, and that's actually one of the things is about becoming visible, because I think that we all struggle with that no matter what the topic is. It's like, am I too much? Am I too little? Am I being seen enough? Am I not being seen? It's this like weird dance between wanting to be seen and wanting to hide, and then having visibility hangovers and all of that. So I think that it's like experiential learning and doing that in a group. Although within the program, a lot of the work can be done in solitary. A lot of it is journaling prompts and art prompts and personal ceremony ideas, different rituals and things that people can lean into, and they can choose to share as much or as little as they'd like, within a private community.
Okay.
And then there'll be some live calls as well. But it's, I think that people can find their comfort level with how much they want to share or not share in it. And I'm so excited that there's a lot of space around, like I said, the 13 modules. Each one I allow 2 weeks because I don't want people to skip over something that is actually going to take a while to process and to really excavate. So there's a lot of space in it, so it doesn't have to be rushed through or feel like it's taking up that whole 2 weeks. It's like sometime in these 2 weeks, maybe we'll do this journaling, and so the program is 6 months long. We start on September 21st, and it'll go from like autumn equinox to spring equinox pretty much. So it feels really like a beautiful time to do that work, that inner work during those darker months of the year.
So beautiful. I love the timing of it. Okay.
Me
So
too.
I'll put your link in the show notes.
Okay, great.
And so registration is still open until the 21st, or
it's open till the 17th.
17th.
Yeah. And then we begin on the 21st.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And there is definitely space there. And there's a cohort forming that is just so powerful. These women that I've spoken with. So I'm super excited to just dive really deeply into this material with people. And it feels so much less lonely than writing a book in a way too, to actually bring everything to life. And have those kinds of conversations.
Wow. Well, I'm so excited for everyone that's going to be joining this. And
thank you.
I don't think I have anything else. Is there any other thing you want to say before we wrap up that we haven't touched on?
Um, no, I think we covered a lot,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
we
Feels
did. It
pretty
was so
complete.
rich. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you. It's
Yeah,
so
I
good to be
really,
with you.
yeah, you too. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and
Mhm.
especially with you, because I know that the work that you do with power reclamation, it just, there's so much resonance and overlap
Mhm.
around undomestication. And
Exactly.
yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, very
Speak the
kindred
same
in a way.
language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I
So
feel that
thank
way
you.
too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.